What we're wanting to highlight is that there's now a 6,000 person backlog of people from refugee backgrounds here in New Zealand that have applied to be reunited with family. Some of these people have been waiting now more than 7 years with still an indefinite amount of time, not knowing whether or not they can be reunited with their family.
Welcome to the Research and Reason podcast. Join us as we discuss the latest research, news and opinion from academics in the Faculty of Arts and Education at the University of Auckland.
Kia ora koutou, ko Julianne Evans aho. I'm Julianne Evans, the Media Advisor for the Faculty of Arts and Education. And today, my guest is Professor Jay Marlowe, who is the head of school and a professor of social work and an expert in refugee studies. Kia ora, Jay. Thank you for coming in.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jay Marlowe toko ingoa. It's great to be here, Julianne. Thank you.
Now, you and your team have just put out a report which is on an important issue that I actually don't think people know very much about. In fact, I didn't. The issue of family reunification for people who've come to this country legitimately as refugees and been accepted here as refugees and are now living here and can ask for and apply for their family members from wherever they're from to come and join them in certain numbers, I would imagine. And that system has stalled and is a bit in trouble, and lots of people have been waiting for years to come to this country and to join their family. How has this backlog occurred?
Yeah, so the report, which is entitled Reuniting Families, was a report co-written by the New Zealand Red Cross and the Center for Asia-Pacific Refugee Studies. And what we're wanting to highlight is that there's now a 6,000 person backlog of people from refugee backgrounds here in New Zealand that have applied to be reunited with family. Some of these people have been waiting now more than 7 years with still an indefinite amount of time, not knowing whether or not they can be reunited with their family. So within this report, we really emphasize that we have a refugee family reunification system that's vitally important, but is under immense strain. And that we feel that it's not fundamentally broken, but it is in urgent need of reform.
And what has happened to cause this backlog? I mean, there's been all kinds of things, haven't there? There's been COVID. There's the fact that you can't apply every year for this program. Is that right? It's not a sort of constant, I want people to come, I can just apply now. What are the main problems with it, do you think?
There would be a few reasons why that backlog has emerged and is being sustained and growing. One is that in 2002, we first started the refugee family reunification process, which was 300 people a year, which was on an annual basis. That was increased to 600 people in 2022. And basically, there's different eligibility criteria, which I don't think we have to go into the specifics of maybe for this, but in the report, it does outline those things. And so what's happened is that people that are eligible for that have been put into almost like a managed queue. And because we can only take 600 people per year, it's meant that queue has grown and grown and grown. And so what we're suggesting are kind of four options of ways of one, trying to address the backlog of 6,000 people, but also trying to introduce more balance into the system so that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation, say, in 5 or 10 years' time.
And what is the situation of these people who are waiting? Like, where are they from, for example? And are they waiting in kind of safe, pleasant places? Or are they waiting, wondering when the bombs are going to come onto them next? Or are they in refugee camps? Where are they?
I would say that really they could be in any of those situations. So to be able to sponsor someone through that refugee family support category, you do have to be from a refugee background in New Zealand. You're given priority if you have no adult family in New Zealand with you. So that's excluding any dependents you might have, like children. And so you'd be put in what's called Tier 1, and you would have that initial priority. So people might be from Afghanistan, they might be from Somalia, they might be from Colombia, they could be from Syria, they could be be from a range of different places. And their family could also be from a range of different places. Their family doesn't necessarily have to be from a refugee background. They could still be in their home country. They could possibly be in a refugee camp. They could be in a neighboring country. It's all those different things. The idea behind the refugee family support category is about reuniting families as opposed to necessarily addressing immediate protection needs.
Okay, so they don't prioritise people who are in immediate danger above people who are just sort of living their lives waiting to come to New Zealand?
It's not entirely clear exactly how that priority works. So at the moment there's about 1,000 people under Tier 1. So those are people who have no immediate family other than dependents in New Zealand that are waiting, and there's about over 4,000 people with about maybe 1,000 applications or sponsors trying to bring those people over. How those people are chosen isn't as clear as to how that transpires.
And so what, just to run quickly back a little bit just to make sense of this, how many refugees generally do we accept into New Zealand under the United Nations quota?
Okay. So New Zealand uses some terms that are kind of unique to New Zealand. So New Zealand has one group of refugees that they refer to as quota refugees. So these are people who are part of our annual refugee resettlement intake, which at one point was 750. It increased to 1,500. And that's the bulk of the refugees that come to New Zealand. There are another group that come to New Zealand without refugee status that apply for asylum within New Zealand. They say, I can't return back to my country that I habitually reside in or that I'm from because I'll be persecuted. If someone says that they have that well-founded fear of persecution, they then become an asylum seeker in New Zealand. If that is recognized by New Zealand, then they become what's called a convention refugee. They've applied the 1951 Refugee Convention and met that threshold for persecution. So on average, maybe over the last 10 years, maybe 200 people or so come via that pathway.
Each year?
Each year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the 1,500, that's the maximum, isn't it, that we could accept every year? But I'm assuming we don't always take 1,500?
We've only very recently just hit 1,500. In fact, it was only a few years ago that we went to that number.
Yeah.
From what I understand this year, we should hit that number or very close to it.
And when they come here, again, for people who perhaps don't know our system, they come for about 6 weeks to the Mangere Centre, don't they?
Yep.
Where we help them to acclimatise to New Zealand and perhaps connect them with other community groups that can help them. Is that how it works?
Yep. It used to be 6 weeks. It's now 5 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And part of that was to actually accommodate the increased numbers that they have to kind of get through that process from 750 to 1,500. And so if you come as part of the UNHCR quota, the UNHCR nominated quota system, you have those 5 weeks that introduces you to life in New Zealand, helps you to get set up with primary health organization, bank account details, learning a little bit about life in New Zealand, those sorts of things. And then people then go out to more than 12, 13 settlement sites across New Zealand. Oftentimes, those people are co-located where their ethnic communities might already be based.
So they always arrive in Auckland. They do their refugee acclimatisation here, and then they can go to Dunedin, to Christchurch, to all around the country to join their groups.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And so coming back to the family reunification, those people then presumably can apply for one family member to join them, but per person or two or three or...
So it's the way that it's currently defined is that a family can apply for to actually be reunited. So and this is part of the complexities around how do you define family, what happens if a family breaks up, and if you've already done one sponsorship, but then say a marriage breaks up or something like that, can that other person possibly sponsor? So there's some of these things that we need to sort of work through in terms of policy reforms to ensure that fundamental right to family is realized.
But for example, somebody who's here from, say, I don't know, the Sudan or something,
Yep.
they could apply, and they're on their own, they could apply for their mother or their father to join them if they
That's
were a
right.
young person,
Yes.
or for their wife, or,
Yes.
yeah. And at the moment, that person might have been waiting for a very long time for anyone to join them. Is that
Yeah, that's
is that-
right.
is
So,
that-
I mean, one of the driving reasons that we wrote the report was that the 6,000 person backlog is that there are now people who have been waiting for 7 years. So let's just, if we take that number of 600 family members are allocated, or offered a visa
across
a year,
everybody.
across everybody,
Mm.
what that would mean to actually just address that backlog is you'd have to pause any new applications for a decade to actually get through that backlog of 600 people a year. So if someone's been waiting for 7 years already, you could feasibly say that that person might have to wait 17 years. And if we've got someone that say maybe that person's got an elderly mother, that mother
They
may
could have
not.
died.
That's
Mm.
right.
So that's not workable, and it's not.
That's right. So
Yeah.
what we're saying is that it's not irreparably broken, but it's under immense strain. It needs to be reformed.
And how will it be reformed, do you think, from your point of view?
So-
Or how can it be?
So within the report, we actually avoided even the term recommendations. We present options that we think are very fruitful ways forward to addressing this issue, of addressing the backlog and rebalancing the system. So the first option that we note is basically doing a managed approach to addressing the backlog. So maybe you might take 1,500 people a year for 4 years, in addition to the ongoing 600 people a year. And that would be a way of helping to address that 6,000 person backlog, assuming that more applications will keep coming in.
So we
at the
just
same
accept
time.
a lot more people. Yeah.
So it might be, you might say, 1,500 people over 4 years, or maybe 1,000 people over 6 years, but something that would give people a sense of hope that this is being done. At the moment, people are just left in indefinite limbo. Family members overseas
Don't know.
They don't know. What should I be preparing for? When will this happen? Will it happen? The Tier 2 category, which is for people that already have a family member here, but they've applied for an additional family member to come, that was last opened in 2017. And there's 4,000 applications that are still waiting
Right.
in that category.
So would we have, if we did increase the if we got through the backlog quicker and then we increased the number annually or whatever, would we have the infrastructure here and the organisation here to properly help these people when
Yeah.
they do arrive and acclimatise them?
So that's a critical question.
Yeah.
And again, one of the reasons I always speak about the idea of options is that we really stress that this is something that will have to be done with refugee background communities, organizations, refugee-led organizations, civil society organizations, and indeed the government. And part of this will be about trying to cost what this would require to do. So if we were to say take another 1,000 family members, that clearly has a cost involved with it, and that has a short-term cost. But there's been other work that I've led through the Center for Asia Pacific Refugee Studies.
Which is here at the university,
Yep.
under the Faculty of Arts and Education, I should say.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah. And that was under a Rutherford Discovery Fellowship through the Royal Society. And what we did is we accessed administrative data, which is held across numerous government ministries. And we identified 25,000 people from refugee backgrounds over 20 years. And we could look at it in a range of different settlement outcomes, from housing to employment to education to health, so on and so forth. And what we did is we divided these different groups into different forced migration categories. So the quota, which I've already spoken about, convention refugees, which are people who came as asylum seekers and then were recognized within New Zealand. But we also isolated a family group, those who came through family reunification. And what that data shows is that they have by far the best settlement outcomes, particularly in terms of economic indicators around getting off the benefit, earning wages and salaries as a predominant form of income. And even over 15 years, you see an ongoing positive trajectory of people. When they first arrive, less than 24% of family members would have wages and salaries as their primary form of income. Over 70% would be on a benefit. That becomes almost completely inverted. So like within 15 years, about 75% are on wages and salaries.
And these are the people, just to clarify, who have come to join the people here.
That's right.
Have actually better outcomes in some ways than the people themselves.
So,
And why is that, do you think?
well, I think, part of this is, you have a family member that's coming in where In many cases, their accommodation is already sorted. They have someone that's already here that understands, the social fabric of New Zealand life. They have the social capital that can connect them to resources, to networks.
So the hard work has been done a little bit
Oh,
for
well,
them.
a lot of that hard work has been done.
Yeah.
And that yields huge dividends.
Not just for the people themselves who are coming in, but obviously for the other people
That's right.
with whom they join, I imagine, from an emotional health point of view,
Yeah.
particularly.
Well, and another piece of this work that we want to try to do within those data sets is even see if we can trace when that family reunification happens and what does that mean for those people that were the sponsors of those family members. What does that mean for them? And again, if you know that your family member is now safe, that they're with you, arguably this goes a long way towards addressing, their sense of, well-being, ability to engage and participate in the wider society. So we can talk about the short-term costs of family reunification, but actually the long-term benefits arguably would far outweigh those costs.
Because it costs a lot of money, I would imagine, for people who initially come here. If they're unhappy or unwell, and especially mentally not well, that costs us money, doesn't it? If you're going to be just very cold-hearted about it.
Yeah.
Whereas it obviously makes sense, you would hope, that they'll be happier if they're joined by people they love.
So within the report, we collaborated with the Refugee Advisory Panel, which is a group of people from refugee backgrounds that advise government on a range of different policies that relate to refugee settlement and protection. And we got them to help to write vignettes that would sort of provide sort of life to, the ideas that we present in the reports. And so they present two different characters in that report. And if you were to read those vignettes, what you can very much see is that you have people that have amazing skills and assets that they can provide to New Zealand, but oftentimes it's difficult to realize those because of the mental stress and worry around what's happening to those families.
Disconnection from people that you love and your world, your country, I guess. Yeah.
And also just the challenges of that almost endemic uncertainty. When will this happen? Will it happen?
So this would go a long way, you think, to fixing that. And what do you think, what do you see some progress in our current, it's a government setting, isn't it? Nobody else can really affect it that much. It has to be a decision from the government or from Immigration New Zealand?
It is a government setting. From what I understand, Immigration New Zealand could actually act on these cases very quickly. It's actually a political decision to do so.
Or not.
The case for some optimism in that is that whilst governments have not necessarily said, yes, we will increase that number, they have actually come out both, bipartisan support around the importance of family reunification.
But you mean the previous government, who was, for listeners who don't know, who were a Labour government, and this current coalition government who have got a slightly different view on things.
Yeah.
But even so, you're saying both governments have basically said we need to do this.
Both governments have said it's an important issue. Whether or not they're committing to action remains to be seen. But we launched the report just last week. There's been quite a bit of media interest around it. We held a webinar, which was well attended, and now we're looking to develop kind of a coalition of civil society organizations, refugee-led organizations, community members, politicians, if they're interested, to then try to think about how is it that we can build this coalition to then make the case for change. This doesn't need to be a political issue. We can look at this in terms of its economic implications. We can look at it in terms of its, its social implications, but not only the implication, but also those benefits.
Jay, you were talking about something earlier, the family-linked humanitarian pathway. What is that?
Yeah, so this is a little bit distinct from the Reuniting Families report. So that's about providing family reunification for people from refugee backgrounds in New Zealand. One of the things that I've critiqued and others have noted as well is that we've had very differential responses to humanitarian crises around the globe. So that we can look at, for example, with Ukraine, very quickly with Ukraine, New Zealand developed a family-linked visa pathway for up to 4,000 family members that could come to New Zealand for protection, provided they had a family link to someone.
And they did? Is that how many?
Well, I think less than 1,000 actually ended up coming. So, but one of the things I raised when that happened, and look, I mean, I think that's great that New Zealand did that for Ukraine, right? In response to Russian aggression. But at the same time that Russian incursion into Ukraine was happening, we also had a dire humanitarian crisis happening in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region. And if you look at the number of Ukrainians in New Zealand, which is about 1,000, there's about 1,000 Ethiopians in New Zealand. And so I raised the question, well, if this is happening for Ukraine, why isn't it happening for Ethiopia? And I think that this raises some very uncomfortable questions around who is deserving of protection and how this might even have racial undertones around that deservingness.
You could say the same about Gaza, couldn't you?
That's right. Well, I mean, I also wrote a piece probably in November, maybe like sort of a month into the Israeli incursion into Gaza, and I also said, there's a vibrant Palestinian community here that would be very keen to sponsor family members, to support them, to keep them safe. As one refugee, or person from a refugee background from Sudan once said to me, it's when elephants fight, it's the grass that gets trampled. And so without having to go into the politics around what's happening between Israel and Gaza, or what's happening in Ethiopia between vying political parties or whatever it might be, it's actually thinking about these people that are caught up in this conflict that they've had.
In hell, pretty much. Mm-hmm.
In unbelievably difficult and dire circumstances. And again, raise the opportunity of, could we create a family-linked visa pathway for those Palestinians in Gaza that have family links to New Zealand, where we could provide protection.
This is outside of every other quota or every other system?
So this is
separate to that?
Because those people aren't necessarily refugees, right? So it's not that the refugee quota system necessarily works. Much in the same way with Ukraine, I mean, some of those people weren't refugees either, right? So the idea of what we're arguing is that New Zealand should establish an annual permanent humanitarian pathway that's family linked. So, whenever a conflict arises, and you never know where that next one might be, where that next humanitarian crisis will emerge.
The world is a dangerous place.
Is that we actually have a mechanism where we can respond very quickly. And we might have an external body that might sort of be able to declare which situations are a humanitarian crisis, for instance, and that would then be the trigger through which, let's say that, the government said, we'll create 1,000 places, 500 places, 200 places, and that the criteria would be a family link. And the reason why we argue for the family link is that it just helps people to settle, it reduces the cost, and I think makes it more politically palatable to actually realize. So alongside this Reuniting Families work, we are also working with some other partners around trying to think about what might that humanitarian pathway look like? What might be the settings for doing that? And then would like to take that to government and to political parties to see if that would be something they'd be willing to get behind.
Let's hope they will. And Jay, that's probably a good place to end. So thank you very much for coming in, and I wish you all the best with everything you're doing.
Kia ora, and thanks, Julianne. It was great to be on the podcast.
You've been listening to the Research and Reason podcast. Stay up to date with the Faculty of Arts and Education by following us on social media.